welcome to the May 31st Planning Commission meeting. We'll call the meeting to order at 9:03. Mr. Spencer, would you do us the honor of leading us in the pledge?
Okay.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
With liberty and justice for all.
Inappropriate, but nice.
Roll call, Mr.
Yes, we do have one commissioner participating by Zoom this morning. Commissioner Shaw.
Here.
I have to help me out here. Is ill and has an exception to the participating in person requirement under the Brown Act. Commissioner Shaw, if you could.
Hi, here. Sorry.
Good morning. Under AB 2449, we understand you're using the just cause exception. Therefore, you have to just have a general description of the circumstances constituting just cause. I understand that the one you will be relying on is contagious illness that prevents a member from attending in person. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. I can't tell if it's allergies or a cold, but I'm not able to be there. Would not be productive in person.
Thank you, Commissioner. So
Thank you.
there's no vote necessary, but every vote does need to be by roll call at this meeting, and whenever a member is participating by teleconference.
You. Commissioner Gonzalez.
I'm here. Sorry.
Commissioner Deal.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Getzler.
Here.
Commissioner Daniels.
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza. Here. Commissioner Wirt. Here. Chair Walsalvich.
Here.
We've got one absent, but order.
Thank you. I have a quick question on Commissioner Shaw's participation. She is allowed to vote, right? Okay. And that's why we have to have a roll call vote on everything. So thank you. All right, now this is the time for public comments for anyone who might have a comment on anything not on the agenda. Margie K, you have a comment on something not on the agenda?
Yes, thank you. I just want to let the commissioners know that Craig Spencer is an excellent customer service person. The question I asked, or the request I asked last month of the last meeting, the last meeting on EIRs in North County or other thing. He responded to me, reached out to me and gave me the answers I wanted. So I want to thank Craig and let you all know that I'm very, very pleased with his response. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie, for letting us know. Positive feedback is so special. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Spencer. All right, time for agenda additions, deletions, or corrections.
Yes, good morning. For the record, we received correspondence from the public for agenda item number 4, PLN 220054, Rossfield. Yes.
Thank you. And as far as agenda additions, deletions, or corrections, we are going to be moving agenda item 5 to agenda item 1. We'll listen to agenda item number 5 before we listen to all the others. Now for commissioner comments or requests.
Oh,
Yes.
I had one and I've just got to remember now what it was because I know I said yesterday I wanted to ask a question. I'm so sorry. This had to do with, I'm so sorry. I do have a commission and it has to do with accessory dwelling units and I'm completely forgetting what my question was. So it'll come back to me and maybe at the end of the meeting. I will remember. Thank you. My apologies, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner Daniels. I'll come back. All right, referrals and other matters.
I remembered, I'm so sorry. Okay, my question has to do with a presentation that we had, and it was regarding the counties working with the various architects for the pre-approved plans for ADUs. And I was just curious if there was any sort of update and whether or not those plans were close to being made available to the public if they were interested in the unincorporated area.
They are very close,
Okay.
yes. We are having them put on our public website. We have 3 primary types of, or sizes of ADUs that are pre-plan checked through our building department that could be used without having to get the engineering and architectural services that you would for a custom built ADU. So those will be provided to the public. We'll provide an announcement at that time. It's within a week or 2, it will be available.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that update. That's great news.
Thank you. All right, planning commission referrals.
I have no update.
Okay. Thank you. All right, approval of our consent agenda. Our consent agenda has 2 meeting minute drafts for April 26th. And our agenda says 26, but I'm thinking that's probably 23. And May 10th, 2023. Does anyone need to pull Commissioner Work?
I think there was one of the votes that was read on one of the transit use ones. I think it's number 2. Pretty sure. I don't know, and I believe-
Which meeting minutes?
10,
May 10th?
number 2.
May 10th, agenda item 2. So can we pull those then and review, or do we need to decide now what was correct?
We don't know. Sure.
So those are the, through the chair, those are the meeting minutes for May 10th, number 2, and that's the vote. That what it is?
Yeah, Commissioner Work?
Yes, that sounds.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely look into that and verify and make sure that that's accurate.
Thank
You're welcome.
Come back.
Yeah, so we'll come back, pull those, and then we'll move on then to the meeting minutes of April 26th. Commissioner Deal?
Question, the consent agenda includes 2 meeting minutes and 1 appointment to the Land Use Advisory Committee. Am I understanding that we want to pull from the consent agenda the draft minutes for the 10th? And the other 2 items remain on the consent agenda?
Correct.
I'd like to move the consent agenda, please.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Shaw,
Sorry, it's a little bit hard to hear you guys.
Commissioner, that was an aye.
Aye, thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Deal,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts,
Aye.
Commissioner Getchman,
Yes.
Commissioner Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Yes.
Commissioner Work.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and welcome to Gina Paulini to the North County Land Use Advisory Committee. Thank you, Gina. Now for scheduled matters, and we're going to listen to agenda item 5 first. County of Monterey Capital Improvement Program, fiscal year 2023-24. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Sullivan, Commissioners, John Snively with Public Works Facilities and Parks. I first want to thank you for allowing us to move this up today. We have budget hearings as well. We're on a very short timeline, so thank you for accommodating us. The item that you have before you today is reference 230007, which is to consider the capital improvement plan's consistency with the 2010 general plan, local coastal plan, and 1982 general plan is applicable. Section 65401 of the California Government Code requires that public works projects for the next fiscal year be submitted to the county planning agency for review and a report to the Board of Supervisors as to conformity with the adopted general plans. By way of review, the CIP is a planning document for public works projects. It covers infrastructure projects with a value of over $100,000 and an expected lifespan of at least 5 years. And we update this plan annually and bring you next year's work plan to the commission for that review. Included with your staff report is a resolution finding that the list of proposed public works projects for next fiscal year are in conformity with the applicable plans. It also includes a attachment 1 2-year resolution, which is a list of all those projects, summarizing both the costs for the projects by location, as well as some details on each project and the work to be completed in the upcoming years. We also have a attachment B, which is a summary of our capital improvement process to help you understand how the Planning Commission review fits into the overall CIP development. And finally, we have a table that addresses level of service roads and some of the projects that are planned to address those level of service needs. Based on the feedback that we received from the commission last year, in addition to providing the Planning Commission with this level of service table, we will also be developing projects to include in our CIP as future year needs that will highlight some of the level of service deficient zones and roadways so that we are tracking those not only in the Planning Commission report, but also in the CIP that is brought to and adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Following adoption of the resolution, the draft CIP will be presented to the Board of Supervisors. Again, today we are taking that forward for budget hearings. And at the end of June, we will bring that back to the board for final adoption. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution reporting to the Board of Supervisors that the CIP is consistent with these plans. Now we'll conclude my opening remarks and staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. I'm very interested in your discussion of taking what you're calling LOS deficient roadways forward in all of your planning and consideration. That's wonderful. I would prefer it if they were categorized as LOS deficient roadways identified for the 2010 general plan, because this is a commitment. This isn't, we've gone down and looked at the condition of the roadways today. We've looked at the condition of the roadways now for 15 years from when that study started, and promised that these were going to be our priorities. So that's why I just have kept harping on it. I'm thrilled to see that finally we're going to be sending that to the board in a way that I hope they will understand what we're trying to say, which is to check the priorities. And that leads me to my other question, which is related to an article on the Monterey County Weekly, I believe it was, about the County Public Works Department now engaging with private funding for road repairs. And I wanted to understand from you how that plays into the priorities for our capital improvement program, or if it's only related to maintenance, or what the deal is with that. Because when we have established priorities of this type, it's really important to me that we watch and make sure that if we reorder those priorities, we're doing it intentionally. And I don't think because one community has a small number of people and a large amount of money, that should be the priority. So how does that new practice affect our resources for capital improvements of the kind represented in this project?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Deal. For a response to that, I would defer to Tom Vonnegut, our Assistant Director of Public Works.
Good morning, Chair Monsalve and Commission members. Tom Vonnegut, Assistant Director of the Public Works Department. Thank you for the question. So it's an exciting opportunity for us to stretch our road dollars, but in answer to your question, I want to assure the Commission that the department is able to walk and chew gum at the same time, so to speak. So when we have these opportunities that may arise, however they arise, it's not at the expense of capital plan that we have laid out to do. We are still pursuing that. It may adjust some of the timing, but we do have the staff and resources, and we work it into our workload to make sure that we are still continuing down the path of our program projects that are approved by the board and recommended by the commissions. And in this case, for example, on Carmel Valley Road, this is something that was planned to be done, but it was in the out years. So we've just changed up the timing. So I hope that answers your question, but it's not in lieu of or at the expense of or not able to do other projects. It's really providing an opportunity to move them up. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, and it's the answer that I anticipated we would receive. And the article suggested that there was some amount of county planning money that was going to be used for completing the planning portion of the project now, rather than later. And that comes out of everybody. And I understand and respect the ability of the department to walk and chew gum. I don't mean in any way to imply that, but if you could remind us of the deficit we have in road repairs in this county right now, I think that will help illustrate my concern.
Right. So we're looking and we're coming up, we're developing our updated pavement management program. But as of the last report of 2 years ago, we reported to the board that we have at least a $600 million deficit, which means we are that much short in deferred maintenance to just bring our countywide road system up to an acceptable level of condition. The other part of it, yes, we are using in this recent example on Carmel Valley Road, the private party is offered and is providing 100% of the construction cost. It's the county road fund that is still funding the design work to get us to a buildable project. But again, I want to emphasize that's something that we would do anyway. So we are still able to stretch our dollars further than we would if we didn't have that donation.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Thank you. Public comment. Is there any public comment? Nothing in the room. Commissioner Shaw.
Hi, sorry, it took me a second to remember how to raise my hand on this. So I had a question about the Kent's Court modernization. And I asked this because I was watching the Board of Supervisors Budget Committee hearing where they discussed this a little bit, and I don't see, it's not reflecting what I heard in that meeting. So I was wondering if this figure of $1,990,000.84 is just for Kent's Court. My understanding that that figure included work to the library in Pajaro as well.
Yes, Commissioner Shaw, this project that's reflected in the CIP is part of our original plan for, sorry, I'm not sure where my camera is. That is part of our original project to improve those units on site. While that project was in development and moving forward, of course, we had our floods, which created a larger amount of additional work that needs to be addressed. We are working with insurance companies to handle that. But for the sake of tracking purposes, we don't want to mix those two, I'll call them projects. So while we try to restore the site from the damage that was caused as a result of the flood, we also are tracking along the original intent, which was to improve and modernize those units. And so that is what is reflected in the CIP.
Okay, so that figure that has nothing to do with the Pajaro Library that was mentioned in the boards.
Correct. Because of the location in Pajaro, we're often mentioning them in the same sentence and in the same conversation, but they are considered two distinct projects.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Deal.
Thank you. And if you would, just for the benefit of my neighbors, interested persons, update us on the progress with the Carmel River Free Project and the Paula Colorado Road repairs.
Thank you for the CR Free project. That is still spearheaded by our colleagues over at HCD. So I would look to them for specific updates on that project. And as for the Paula Colorado Road, I would again look to Public Works to speak to that. Jamie, is there someone who could talk to CR Free?
I can give an update on CR Free. There are agreements in place and funding awarded through federal government, I believe, to pay for the CR3 project. So there are a couple more agreements that need to go forward. Some have to do with a turn lane, but there's agreements in place with Carmel Area Wastewater District. The project is approved, the EIR is certified, and the funding is going to the board to accept funding grant agreements for that project very near future.
And that is looking at a pretty incipient start date. I mean, what are we talking about? Actual work that people will actually see on the
I
road?
don't have a start date. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
I think what I'm hearing from people is that we've heard about this, we've heard about these, we've heard about this. We said it was starting. When is it going to start? Because it's just such a critical area for access. Anyway, thank you. And then Paula, Colorado Road.
Yes, briefly in Paula, Colorado. So we are working through, and by the first quarter or second quarter, basically by the end of the calendar year, if not sooner of this year, we expect to have the preliminary design completed and the environmental permitting and clearance needed for the repairs on Paula, Colorado Road. And then that will begin another discussion on how to actually fund those repairs. We believe right now we're looking at least $15 million or more to make those repairs to that section.
So there's no sense that any repairs are going to commence anytime soon.
Not immediately, but we are working towards that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a public comment. Oh, Commissioner Daniels?
Yes, thank you so much. Through the chair, the question I have just in regards to the Paula, Colorado one is if you're from mile 0.4 to 7.8, is that the extent of the damages that go all the way in terms of the county portion of that road, or is there still some areas that will be unaddressed?
That's the focus area that we're looking at, and it's not everything in that 4 mile stretch, but they are discrete locations within that segment, slip outs on a curve or a slide. But that's the area, that is what the project is.
And so just to follow up, then would there be full access of the portion of the road that's the county road that's closed if this work were completed? I know that the federal government picks up a portion of the road or something as you move further deep inland, but I'm just curious if this is the extent of what we've been seeing and waiting for so many years.
Yes, this is the portion where there's restricted access behind the gates. So when these repairs are affected, that'll make the road safely passable to really its terminus at the kind of campground. Well, the Boy Scout is much further down, but there's a distinct end to the road, the paved road. So that's the stretch we're talking about.
Wonderful, thank you.
Doing it. It'd be nice when they
Not paid, but yes.
All right. Commissioner Shaw?
Hi, thank you. I was just curious if you could explain, is the work that has been done at the Salinas Road, Werner, Fruitland area part of this G12 corridor study?
He's never had questions.
I should learn my lesson and just stay up here. So thank you for the question. I guess I'll look there, but it's related. We are making improvements along the entire G12 corridor, but we've also, and we have a proposed project to improve the intersection where Werner come in. It's down the hill there, but the area you're talking about, if we're all aware, is a little bit up the hill where Fruitland comes into Salinas Road. And in our outreach with the community, we've heard a lot of concern about that and vehicle queuing and blocking and access. And so based on our most recent outreach meeting a while back, we made a further, what we termed a near-term improvement to try and further help the situation, particularly for the residents coming out and trying to get from Fruitland onto Salinas Road. And so the intent was to restripe it, do something that would help as we still work towards the bigger picture solution for that entire interchange or intersection area.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Yeah, actually, that's the same thing I was going to ask about on the G12, the Pajaro to Prudhoe corridor. How far along is the study? Because I know we've been working on the study for quite a few years now. When will we start seeing some progress, maybe some work done? Or something where the community has a better idea as far as what we're gonna be doing.
Right, so we have a study that already provided recommended improvements, and the corridor is broken up into, I believe, 6 segments, and each segment has various project
Right.
recommendations. And we have been successful in getting some grant funds and other funding support to begin working on those. For example, we're in design on roundabout improvements. We will be moving forward on segment 6 in the Pajaro area with road improvements. So we have a roadmap, if you will, to make improvements based on the study recommendations. And now we are very actively looking for funds, and in some cases have funds to start advancing those recommended projects. But it'll be a process to get the entire corridor done.
All right, thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? All right, we have one public comment, Margie Kay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted, I actually was gone for a week. I just returned home late yesterday, but I did look on Nextdoor, and there is a lot of complaints about the new work that was done at Fruitland and Salinas Road and the danger of it. So most of you don't travel that area, and just so you know that there is a lot of unhappiness with what was done. The other thing I just have to ask, since I just got home and I haven't caught up on, Commissioner Deal made mention about an article on Monterey County Weekly and public-private work on roads, I think is what I understood. So I'm just wondering if there is some public assistance in road repairs, does that entitle them to anything special for what they're doing? I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the chair? Would you like me to?
Please, either of you.
Sure. So no, there's no special or preferential treatment. We literally had a party approach us. The conversation began as concern about the condition of the road in that vicinity, as typical. But then, unlike most conversations after this party understood our challenges, they began a discussion about how to help fund improvements. And then that quickly led to the cost sharing agreement where they agreed to fund it in its entirety. But the county controls the project. We've never been asked, it's never been intimated that the county has been asked for any favors or consideration on other approvals. It was a straight up clean deal, so to speak, where it was just, there was a party interested in doing something about the road because they were concerned about the condition, and they provided funding to make a repair happen.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendoza.
On the Fruitland section that was just spoken about, it actually, I live out there. I live in Monterey County. It's very, very confusing. And I think we're probably gonna end up with some accidents there, just the way it's laid out. It's quite confusing. But I think it's something that we should look into a little bit further, because I think it's actually really dangerous.
Thank you, Commissioner Mendoza. Commissioner Shaw?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of expand on that because I also use that road to commute often, and my husband uses it every day to commute. And I do have video evidence on more than one occasion of multiple cars passing illegally at a really high rate of speed. And I agree that it's just a matter of time before there's a very serious accident because the way that it is set up is very confusing, and the traffic, instead of just being backed up on the side of the road now to the golf course, is now actually backing up completely to the overpass on the highway. So maybe some outreach to the community and people who use that, or having more law enforcement presence, could be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. All right, I see no other public comments. Do we have any written correspondence on this agenda item, Ms. Magana?
We have no written correspondence for this item.
Okay, we're closing public comment. Commissioner discussion, Commissioner Deal.
I actually do have another question for the experts before us here today. What would be the appropriate route to have some budgetary allowance to work on issues relating to visitor management on places like the Old Coast Road in Big Sur. What would be the correct route at these budget times to allow a window for some cooperation with law enforcement, Caltrans, or whoever in the road design and maintenance with respect to those areas that are experiencing significant congestion, some of which are in fact the county?
That's a very good question. Certainly, if there is interest by whomever is interested in any kind of potential project, it's reaching out either to who you think might be the responsible department or your elected representative to share your concern and to highlight the issue on what it is, and we take direction from the board on where to set priorities. In terms of the budgetary process, that could manifest itself in the board's budget workshop or workshop to your commission and others to try and essentially have a potential project or activity rise to the point where it gets funded for implementation. But I think the concise and short answer would be, contact the county department or your elected officials to first make us aware of what the concern or request is.
Commissioner Deal?
Having done all those things, excuse me, and not having a napkin, as I was worried about, having done all those things for a great deal of time now, years and years, my difficulty is there's no provision for anyone to even have the conversation to figure out what to do. And it needs to be everybody. It needs to be the county public works department at that table. And until we find some way to break the deadlock of, oh, you've got to bring it up here. Oh, you should have brought it up there. Oh, we don't have any allowance to have the conversation to figure out what might be possible. That's where we're at right now. And that's why, you're so creative. That's why I'm asking about it's not that we haven't spoken to people about it. The answer we frequently get is it's Caltrans. And the answer that I'm giving you is it's not all Caltrans. Some of those are county roads. And we can't ever get through this. And I'm asking for creative ways to open a window for the conversations about what to do. We can't expect a project to emerge that would be a fundable, doable project without the early participation of all of the stakeholders. Most of the stakeholders don't have any provision for that kind of advanced work. I'm asking Public Works to give strong consideration about how you would go about making a space for someone who has the ability to be useful to be part of those conversations to figure out what the heck to do, because people are going to die. I mean, we're having significant problems down there right now. And Public Works comes down, grades the road, closes the road, opens the road, does all we can, the maintenance people are doing everything they can think of, but it's ad hoc. And we don't have any way to bring that together with advanced planning. And never the twain shall meet, as far as I can determine. So if there's a way to include in our capital planning, the plan to plan, at least something, so that people have that allowance, it would be a big way to break out of that. And this is including other intersections with Highway 1, of course, because we maintain the Highlands roads, we maintain a good many other county roads. That's what I'm asking is how do we get through that? And maybe it's just a question of keep saying it to more people, but that's been going on now for a good 8 years. So I'm losing patience.
Thank you, Commissioner Deal. All right, I see no other commissioner hands up. Commissioner Deal.
To go ahead and move approval of our resolution saying that the proposed projects are consistent with the Monterey County General Plan, and adding in that resolution that 4 out of the 52 items identified for correction in the 2010 General Plan are listed for treatment at this time. That's less than 8%.
I'll second that motion. Thank you. All right, we have a modified motion and a second. We have the modification down. Let's proceed with
Commissioner Shaw,
Yeah.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Deal,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Genselman,
Yes.
Commissioner Daniels,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Yes.
Commissioner Work,
Yes.
and Chair Montalvo.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Thank you. All right, now we'll move on then to agenda item number 4, PLN 220054. We're gonna take actually a quick break to do some cleanup, I think. Just to give everybody a chance. Yeah. Cleanup what?
You guys, I need to tell you, I had my phone
We don't have to do roll call, right? We do have to do roll call
I think
because we have,
We should, yeah.
thank you.
Commissioner
Sorry.
Shaw.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Mr. Deal,
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Getzmann.
Here.
Mr. Daniels.
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Here.
Mr. Wirt.
Here.
Chairman Saul.
Here. All right, we will, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 4.
If you want to sit copy first.
I want to say the names correctly. Rocio Geert.
Here, pretty good.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
So good morning, commissioners. I'm Phil Angelo, and I'll be presenting staff reports on the Rocio project, PLN 220054. The hearing on this item was continued from the April 12th Planning Commission meeting with direction to staff to research whether the items had been appropriately noticed and whether it was consistent with our current regulations. The item had been noticed correctly, but there is an inconsistency with the regulations for transient uses. The project is located at 282 Corral de Tierra in the Toro area plan. And the project would be to allow transient use of a residential property for remuneration or a short-term rental. And this is the site plan for the property, which is developed with a pool and residence and associated infrastructure like an on-site wastewater treatment system. And then these are photos of the site, and then photos looking down from the shared access driveway. Title 21, section 21.64.280 permits transient use of residential property in zoning districts which allow residential use, subject to an administrative permit. The applicant submitted an operations plan which demonstrated consistency with the regulations in that section of the municipal code, except for subsection 21.64.280.d.2.g. Property has access through a private road which connects the site to Corral de Tierra and is served by the Altadena Mutual Water System. Both the road and water system are governed by a recorded mutual agreement from 1963. The agreement establishes the Altadena Association, and page 3 of the agreement indicates that it shall have the force and effect of a covenant that runs with the land in perpetuity. The road and water agreement triggers consideration of 2 sections of Monterey County Code, chapter 16.80 regulations for private roads, and the previously mentioned subsection G of regulations for transient uses. The project is consistent with chapter 16.80 as the project has a road agreement in place. The regulations for private roads indicate that we rely on the plain language of that agreement and may approve the project unless there's something that's clearly inconsistent with the regulation with it. The project is not consistent with subject section G of that code section that I previously coded. That portion of the code indicates that when a homeowners association objects to the issuance of a permit, the permit shall not be approved until the homeowner association's objection has been withdrawn or the right of the applicant to use the property for transient uses has been validated, approved, or otherwise ordered by a court, arbitrator, or other appropriate entity. In this case, the Altadena Association objected to the issuance of the permit and provided a resolution documenting their objection on May 11th. On May 22nd, applicant's representative submitted correspondence making the case that the project did not violate any covenants on real property and that the water use should be categorized as domestic rather than a commercial use. This doesn't alter staff's recommendation in this case, as the regulations indicate the county cannot act to approve the permit when an objection from a homeowners association is received unless it's rescinded or otherwise ordered by a court. And that section applies regardless of what the objection is. And this is kind of the entirety of that code section. And therefore, staff are recommending that the Planning Commission deny the administrative permit to allow the transient use and find the denial statutorily exempt from CEQA. And that concludes staff's presentation. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Commissioners? I have a question. Commissioner Daniels?
Through the chair, even if there wasn't a homeowners association, I'm just curious what the current inland ordinance states about a private road, just in general. If you have a private road and there's objections from homeowners on that road, I know we're trying to address that in the ordinance that's being drafted now, but is there anything in the current ordinance that would address what happens when there's a private road and you have residents on that road that are not in agreement with this use of the property?
So that would be covered by a separate chapter in the municipal code, chapter 16.0, the regulations for private roads. And it has this 4-tier system that essentially is there an agreement on the access? And then is there an agreement on the maintenance? And if there isn't like an agreement that covers both of those things, or like you have the access through an easement and there's a maintenance agreement, that section of the code says rely on plan language that it's done for that piece of it. But then the other tiers are like you have access, but you don't have an agreement on maintenance, in which case that could.
So just while you're looking that up, through the chair, just agreements aside, like it is a private road, there's 10 homes, I'm just making this up, homeowners. What happens in the case of one homeowner deciding they want a particular use, like transient use on their property? Is there an obligation to get the consent of all of the people on that road, whether or not there's no agreement?
Yeah, it's a proof of access ordinance. It's in Title 16 of the county code. It's similar to the discussion Mr. Angelo just had with the homeowners association objection. Essentially, it's the county trying to get out of the middle of that argument. It's between the homeowners association or the private parties to that private road and the homeowner, not the county. So the county and our actions would rely on the documents. Are there documents giving the right of access to this property?
Okay.
If there is, we rely on that as evidence that there is access. If there isn't, then we can apply a condition that says, demonstrate that there is the right to access. Or if there's an argument over the fair share costs of the maintenance of that road, and one project's going to significantly increase the use of that road and they have to pay more, and the other parties object, and there's no written agreement that describes what that cost share is, then we can put a condition that requires them to figure it out before we take action. But if there isn't a question about the use being able to, the access being there for access across other properties to the property that in question, we rely on that for the purposes of our determination on a permit.
Okay, so one last question then. If I'm understanding the resolution that's before us, is it effectively saying that there's a dispute that needs to be settled before we even address this item?
The dispute in this case is there is a homeowners association with the terminal Monterey homeowners association. They have objected to the issuance of the administrative permit. The interpretation of the association's rules is really not, again, that's something we're trying to get out of, but our rules say if there's an objection, we want to prove it. There is an objection, we're recommending not.
I have no more questions.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions? All right, the applicant would like to make a presentation.
Yes, hi there, my name is Geert. I have a representative, after all the confusion of last time, I decided to get some help. So Melissa Belo is going to be representing us.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
My name's Melissa Balo, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Harrington Tracy. If I share my screen, will you be able to see it?
Yes,
Okay.
we hope.
Sorry about that. For some reason, my computer permissions are not allowing this. Let me just try this again. All right, this is not letting me share. So I'll just walk through it. I understand, Mr. Angelo's, position on this and the county's position of trying to get out of the middle of, homeowners and homeowners associations. But in short, a short-term rental use of this property is lawful. And this is an unlawful restriction that is trying to be imposed. And by denying this permit on this basis, the county is actually acceding to an unlawful restriction. And it's a shame because these are the people that you want renting. They plan to be residents there 50% of the time. And their average occupancy is 3.3 people per day for the whole entire year, which is a very low use of a 6-bedroom home. And the county's determination is sort of a 2-step process. First, they have to determine that there is actually a common interest development and an association that governs that. And we question whether or not the Alta Tierra Association is actually a homeowners association as defined by the Davis-Sterling Act. The step necessary for the finding that this is a homeowners association whose objection registers for the purposes of the ordinance, I think that finding was arbitrary. The Alta Tierra Association Civil Code 4200 requires a declaration to be recorded. The only recorded document that we've seen is the covenant. And there's certain steps necessary in order to establish a common interest development that have not happened here. There's certain disclosures that are required to be given to buyers when people buy a piece of property, and that's governed by section 4525. None of those disclosures were made to the homeowners here. So that is the first part. And the second part is, even if they are a common interest development in a homeowners association, again, they have no authority to pass resolutions taking positions on a homeowner's, application for a permit. They have a very, very small bit of authority regarding the water, the maintenance of roads, well, pumping equipment, water line, storage tank, and provide water for each of the parcels. And this falls outside the scope of their authority. And as you know, the commission's decision must be based on substantial evidence. And a court's review of this decision will delve into the reasonableness of the decision based on the administrative record. And the Planning Commission does not need to adopt the association's interpretation of the agreement. The interpretation of domestic water usage is, to put a word to it, it's tortured. Domestic water use is a term of art that has been in use far before the 1963 agreement. To redefine it to a single family use, I think has implications far beyond, this actual dispute here. It's transient water use is not defined anywhere in the law. And domestic water use is also not defined in the Monterey County Code. And necessarily, as per the code, you have to turn to state law to make that definition. And a private agreement using domestic water use cannot control, an actual, the county's decision on this. And It's just agreeing to a homeowners association that just, all of their meetings prior to this have been very much restricted to the road use and to the water maintenance, and have just decided now that they are able to restrict, the use of a member's property. And I just wonder if, all the houses for sale, if this is going to be disclosed to all the buyers. And these are responsible and thoughtful owners, and they're exactly who should be renting. They'll have everything managed by a professional property management, and they'll be screening their renters, and will even exceed to, self-restrict the number of people who will be able to use it. And finally, if any use other than a single family residence of any of these properties is going to be deemed a commercial water use, there was an LLC registered, Heritage Farms LLC was registered to one of the homeowners' addresses there. And would that be deemed a commercial use as well, such that no one will be able to register any of their corporations or LLCs to their home addresses? And so, yes, my conclusion here is that this is a tortured reading of the agreement, and the county is actually getting into the middle now by allowing a self-described homeowners association to restrict the use of a member's property. Would anyone have any questions?
Commissioner Roberts?
I actually don't have a question. I just want to give the applicant's agent an opportunity to share whatever information visually you wanted to share, and ask staff if that's something on our side that maybe was a restriction that she wasn't able to.
Yeah, I think I have the slides
Okay.
I can present.
There's no restriction. There should be a share screen option at the bottom of the Zoom screen. But if not, she can always email it in and then we can share it for her.
Now, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Sorry, I was just working. My computer is not cooperating with me today. My apologies. I went over a good bit of this, and I will definitely email it to Mr. Angelo. I actually have another one that I intended to show. One second. No, here it is. Yeah, I'll email this to Mr. Angelo, but I did go through all of this. I'm just.
Melissa, can I make a point, please? If you go to slide number 5.
Yes.
So this was the planning officer opinion when we showed up first, right, 6 weeks ago. And so this is Mr. Angelo saying, we had an argument if there's an HOA or not an HOA. And he says, I respectfully disagree. However, I think that there's an instance of distinction with this difference because the plain language of the water agreement does not restrict its use. So then a week later, the planning commission changed their mind. The office, I don't know why. So if you go to the next slide, please, Melissa.
Yeah.
I may. So that's the agreement, right? Domestic purposes. So this whole discussion is about the definition of domestic purpose. So if you go to the next slide, please. One more. All right, so this is now what the planner's office says about domestic use, right? It says the term domestic purpose is not defined, which is correct, right? Then they say, however, they define the definition of a family. I do not know how they make that jump. We're talking about domestic water use. So then they say, somehow they tie family to domestic water use, which is fine. And then they say, this definition suggests that short-term rental water use is more properly viewed as a commercial use rather than a domestic use. this makes no sense. It does not make any sense because domestic, well, I'll come back. It doesn't make any sense. Let me finish, right? So, but let's go to the first term, the term in the red, right? If it's not defined in the Title 21, the planner himself had said, the thing at the bottom, if it's not defined in the code, you have to go to the state law. That is the law. So if you go to the next slide, next one. Yeah, so that actually said, oh, go back, this please. So that's what it says, right? That's the ordinance. You have to go to state law if it's not defined in Title 21. So if you go to state law, the next slide, it has all those uses. It's small print, but it's basically domestic, irrigation, power, agriculture. It lists all the water uses, right? And then domestic use is very clearly defined. It's hotels, resorts, motels, campgrounds, right? It's basically any human consumption within, a wide range of facilities. So it's unambiguously defined in state law, right? So then,
May I also, if I don't mind, I'd also just like to, I mean, this is a document, if you're seeing it's a County Planning Commission document from 2009 about a tennis ranch with guest accommodations, dormitories with 91 beds. And in it, it describes the water supply, if I can find it. It's being supplied with domestic water to the property. I mean, that's just it's a term in water use. It's not, there was no, they didn't make up a different use of that term for this covenant that was signed in 1963. And to that end, I found, and I can email to Mr. Angelo, there's a 1963 Water Board document that talks about beneficial water use. One is domestic water use, and then there's irrigation and mining and industrial uses. There's no delineation between domestic and commercial.
Yes, so if you go back to slide number 8, please. Mm-hmm. I'm jumping around a little bit, but okay. Sure. So, next one, 9. All right. So it does say that if it's not defined, there's state law, but also you can look at other chapters of the Monterey Code. So if you go to slide number 11, there is no clear definition of domestic use. However, there is a definition of domestic water systems, which, it's not exactly the same, but it's very close. And that basically clearly states that domestic water use is for human consumption. There is no restriction about commercial. So then if you go to the next slide, so now this is what the planner office is saying. We already went through that, right? So they tie a family. This is the planner. This is not the homeowner. This is not the Alta Association. It is the planning office. They're basically saying that they tie a family to domestic purposes, which is incredibly restrictive. It basically says if you're not a family, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to have domestic use of water. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And then later they say, this water use is viewed more as a commercial than a domestic use. This is a nonsensical statement.
Commissioner Deal.
Thank you. I have a question for the applicant. The resolution in front of us takes no stand on any of these matters, which are then referred to you in a civil court. If you want to follow through, you need to follow through the civil matter of the arguments you just made in front of someone whose jurisdiction it is. The resolution that's been presented by staff appears to me to be very simple. It says that according to the plain reading of the language of the ordinance around short-term rentals that exists today, that if there is a homeowners association that registers an objection, the planning commission cannot act on that application. It doesn't say the merits, we're not arguing what the argument, what the disagreement might be, which is what you're doing here. That would be heard in a different place. The only question I would have is it your contention that there is no homeowners association?
That I will leave to Melissa.
Yes.
That's really the only thing that I am, if you have a contention that's backed by evidence that there is in fact no homeowners association, that would make a difference to my opinion. But the rest of this is completely for a different venue.
Understood.
I'll let Melissa answer that first, but I do want to come back to your point. I don't 100% agree, but let Melissa answer first about the homeowner, the Alta Association. Melissa?
Yes, and thank you for that question. It's pertinent to the beginning of what I had argued is the Davis-Sterling Act is a comprehensive set of laws and regulations that govern common interest developments in the associations and all of the duties and responsibilities and authority that those associations have. And just to disagree, I don't think the burden is on the homeowner to prove that there's not a homeowners association. I would say that the homeowners association has to prove that they are. And they're missing some steps in terms of the establishment. And in terms of any of the compliance with the law over the years that they have certainly not done. There's no indication on that resolution who was present at the meeting, who voted on that resolution. Is there a board of directors? They're not incorporated. The question is we don't even know who to sue after this. There's just absolutely all they have is a covenant. And the covenant is very clear that the agreement is to an Alta Tierra association that provides for the maintenance of the roads, the well, the pumping equipment, the water line, the storage tank, and to provide water. I don't agree that that is a homeowners association.
So if I may belabor that, it's not because you could qualify as a homeowners association that you are a homeowners association under Sterling Davis. You have to follow the rules. You have to register. You have to have a board. You have to have elections. You have to do all those things. You cannot just show up one day and say, "Hi, I have a covenant, therefore I am an HOA." You are not. You have to follow the rules. When I bought this house, I looked it up. I went to the registration of what is it's a department of, I have it somewhere, but there is no register. It does not exist under Sterling Davis. So all there is a 2-page 1963 document. That does not make an HOA, simply not.
Commissioner Daniels?
Yeah, I have a question for staff and it could be for the applicant as well, but I just want some clarification. Again, it sounds like what's before us is in plain language, figure out the civil matter, figure out the answer to that question, and then we can proceed, but we cannot when there is a question or a dispute from a homeowners association. So I want to be clear that that's what I'm reading here. And the second thing I want to be clear about is in listening to the applicant's presentation, I heard things like this is a lawful use of the property. And I want to get really clear about the discretion the Planning Commission has. So even if there wasn't the question before us about whether a homeowners association exists, it's not a right to have a short-term rental. You come into the county planning department and you apply for a permit. And it's really getting to be tiresome, and I mean this kindly, that folks come in here and demand a permit for something that, if I'm not understanding the term, correct me if I'm wrong, is discretionary. We look at the merits of an application and make a decision based on the appropriateness of that permit. And so when I hear the applicant's representation saying this is lawful and they have a right to do this, I need some clarification from staff as to whether or not that is accurate.
May I don't believe I said that the homeowners have a right to the permit. It is a lawful use of the property. And there's bounds to the discretion of a government body. It can't act arbitrarily and capriciously. Findings need to be based in substantial evidence, and it needs to be reasonable.
Yes, through the chair, I will have Mr. Angelo answer the first part, but for the second part, you're correct, it is a discretionary action. The planning commission has made discretionary actions on short-term rentals in the past, notwithstanding an HOA, and it was based on merits in each case. You do have the discretion to make a decision.
Through the chair, from Commissioner Daniels, the resolution that's before you is that the county can't act to approve the project while there is an objection to an HOA until that matter is resolved. It doesn't delve into whether the HOA is compliant with the Davis-Sterling Act or whatever other applicable laws apply to associations.
But that is a crucial statement, right? If I may. Melissa, you want to talk?
Sure. Mr. Angelo, I totally agree. If that was Mr. Angelo talking, that is what is before, but that resolution is based on a finding that the property is subject to a homeowners association, and that is the finding that we assert is not grounded in substantial evidence or, with state law.
Yes. So clearly, if I repeat myself.
Commissioner Neal, you had a comment?
Sorry,
or
I didn't see that. Sorry about that.
I did, and I would just, as I often do to bore everybody about being here for a long time. I do recall that we had in the past made the finding that, not made the finding, but operated under the understanding that the Pebble Beach Company was, while not officially a homeowners association, acting in the role of a homeowners association with respect to this particular use. So it wasn't, by using this section of the code that Mr. Angelo is talking about, we have not always strictly interpreted it that we needed to see all of the documents for a homeowners association. Because again, we thought those arguments were something best conducted out of the county's time and budget, for other people to do. And I also just wanted to point out that we do have homeowners associations who have prohibited short-term rentals within Monterey County, and that we've upheld that in exactly the same way. That if you have an issue with your homeowners association having prohibited you from doing something that you think you can do, you take it up with them in the appropriate venue, which is not here, and we're not going to act until you do that. And I just want to be really clear to the applicant. Some homeowners associations have said flat out, no short-term rentals, we aren't going to do that here. Some have said we are under certain circumstances. Some have said that they can only have so many houses in their association that are rentals at all. You have to get on the line to be allowed to have your turn at renting out your property. All of those things are, we have seen homeowners associations do. And I think that my concern here is that I'm sorry that you didn't understand that there was going to be this level of concern and were not able to address it. But I can't make a finding on all of this sort of thing based on the plain language of our code, knowing that in the past, we've made these interpretations based on the interest of the community. What we're trying to say is if you have a community of people who are speaking with a remotely significant voice, and I think we at the Planning Commission have certainly heard a lot of people talk, and I think we are able to tell the difference between whether we have a significant voice of the community or one or two people who are carrying a lot of volume but not community support. bottom line, this is a community issue that needs to be solved in your local community. And it really does, because it's gonna clearly be something that is not just for one property. Whatever the outcome is for your association, it's gonna apply to everybody. So that's what I'm trying to get to this argument. And I think we've been more productive in the last two statements. Your contention, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the homeowners association is not legitimately speaking as a homeowners association. In other words, there is not one.
Yes.
That's
there's
what
no
you're
point.
saying.
It is, and again, I understand that it's a discretionary decision. At this point, I'm only getting to the point of getting the facts straight, and then you can decide, or you should decide, but you should decide on the facts. There is no homeowners association. All there is a 2-page 1963 covenant. That's all there is, right? I bought this property. You asked last time, did you read everything? I read everything. I researched everything. This is not a legal Sterling Davis Homeowners Association, simply not. Okay, so that is the case. I do want to come back to your.
Can we finish your presentation? Because I think that we're going in a direction with the presentation and our discussion that I think we're going in two different directions. You're going in the direction of, if I convince the planning commission that this is not an HOA, then I have their support. But that's not. But that's not the case. I think that number one, yes, you have the challenge of, well, you both have the challenge of proving that it's not an HOA or proving that it is an HOA. Here today, and I haven't even heard any public comment yet, but I haven't heard that it is an HOA.
Okay.
But that said, you do have neighbors. And every time we consider one of these applications, we are listening to the community. We're listening to the neighbors' concerns about a short-term rental on their street. Therefore, whether or not you have an HOA opposing your hope for a short-term rental, we would still be listening to those neighbors' oppositions.
And I'm not disputing that at all, right? I am defending my case.
The challenge of whether or not you have an HOA opposing your project is not a challenge we can decide. We don't have the jurisdiction, we don't have the authority to decide which fact is actually fact. Yes, HOA or not HOA.
Okay.
So since we don't have that ability, we don't even need to spend more time on that subject because we can't decide that.
But then if I may make a question, then you're saying that the planner's assertion that it is an HOA doesn't matter. He cannot make that assertion.
None of us are saying that it is or isn't. The fact that they have represented as an HOA with an opposition triggers for us that requirement
Okay,
to.
that's it. I know I need to go, but one more to Commissioner's deal or your point. Can you go back to this slide? What is it now? Number 8, please.
Yes.
Yes, you were saying, Commissioner Deal, that this is irrelevant, to your decision, but it is not. I posit that it is not. This sentence is a planning commission's decision. It's an official document. It's a ruling, right? It redefines domestic use. Independent of my case, what you have done, you have massively restricted the definition of domestic purpose of water. You cannot do that. Actually, you would be very well advised not to do that. So what this is saying is that a commercial property cannot use domestic use of water. That's what this is saying.
All right.
So I would ask to basically strike this, just agree that this is not a legal definition.
Commissioner Roberts?
I just want to say, I agree with you. It's not in our actual resolution. It is in our board background. And it's not something that I want as a statement either. And certainly
Yes.
it is.
Yeah, so that is what I wanted to achieve, because this whole paragraph is incredibly damaging to the whole county. you're putting businesses out of business, right? Yeah. Okay, that's what I wanted to achieve. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I just have one more? I do, in the findings, 1C does say that the subject property is subject to a homeowners association, and that legal conclusion is within the findings that have been presented to the commission for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Through the chair, yeah, just to clarify that sentence that's up there is not in the draft resolution. That was part of the cover report, which is an informational document.
So it's easy to strike. I also would like to request that the resolution strike any confirmation that we have that we are dealing with, in fact, an HOA. Because unless there's evidence from staff that we've confirmed that this is an HOA.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Deal?
The reason for this resolution is that the HOA objection doesn't allow us to act. So for this resolution to mean anything, we have to at least acknowledge that we have a group that are representing themselves as an HOA, and that's the problem. So if you can't take out all references to an HOA and have that be the case. And we haven't listened to them make their argument either, which I think is probably relevant. But yeah, I would be concerned about that direction when they have to explore it further.
Then let's explore.
But first, we have to hear from the public, I think, before I would be comfortable doing that.
Public comment.
Council. And then ask council.
Good morning. My name is David Balch, and I'm representing the Alta Tierra Association. And I don't want to belabor the point here. The big issue that has been addressed is whether or not it's an HOA. Members of the HOA met with county staff, and in the page 2 of the report, it notes that the Alta Tierra Association was established by a mutual water and road agreement. It was recorded. It covers the properties. It has the force and effect of a covenant running with the land. The agreement shall be binding upon the heirs, the assigns, and successors. And Scott Hennessy also met on May 11th with Mr. Angelo and gave him a binder full of meetings, resolutions, expenses over time. And there was the finding that the association has met to maintain the common road and water system and discuss other matters of neighborhood concern for years. And a brief history of the association. Attached records is included as Exhibit D. At no point was any more information requested as to whether or not there was an HOA. And I looked at Exhibit G, which is applicant's counsel's letter, and it does not really address that there is not an HOA here. It addresses the merits of the argument as to whether or not this is a domestic use. You know, if they had challenged it at that point, we certainly could have looked into it more, but staff was very comfortable that this was an HOA. A couple of just quick points. One issue was raised that, you know, lack of notice, but I think the applicant has admitted that before he purchased the property, he knew of this agreement, he had read it, and in fact, there's about $1,000 check from him to the HOA for his dues. He was invited to the meeting in May, he did not attend. At no point has he ever asked for a ruling of the HOA that an additional use of water beyond domestic be allocated. So the HOA has done everything that it could and should up to this point. I think the ball's in the applicant's court to either work with the HOA to figure out a resolution, you know, or to move on. One of the things that I do find interesting is they keep talking that this is a lawful use of the property. Let's be very clear. It's already being used for this purpose without a permit. It is de facto an unlawful use as of today. Last point real quick, and again, it goes to the merits, I'm not going to belabor it. What does domestic mean? For a private contract, words are not interpreted based on the state code. Words are interpreted based on the dictionary and common sense definitions used by private parties. Whatever the water code or the water board want to define domestic for in terms of water allocation or water diversion purposes has no bearing on what a bunch of lay people in 1963 with a private well were thinking. You go to the definition of domestic in the Oxford Dictionary, it says family use. And how is the family defined in the county code? Non-transient. So on the merits, we have a good argument. We don't even have to get there because once an HOA stands up and objects, as folks have noted, the commission is without power to resolve that objection. That has to be done by court or an arbitrator or an approved finder of fact. So if there's any questions, I'm here. We've also got a few folks from the HOA here who wanted to talk. If you have any questions historically, certainly they're here to answer them as well. And so Scott, you want to come up?
Good morning. I'm Scott Hennessy, resident at 294 Corral de Tierra. I'm here just basically to answer any questions. I've looked into the documentation of the HOA. It was formed in 1963 by some local prominent families that developed the subdivision. They planned a subdivision for their families and friends and designed it to be for residential use. They didn't have any thoughts of being commercial at that time. They didn't even know the SDRs existed, honestly. And from my perspective, SDR use may be appropriate in some communities, in some areas where there's proper infrastructure. In our case, we have very limited infrastructure. It's adequate to service the families that live there, that know how to drive the road, how to use water. And that's my position, basically. And the HOA was incorporated at one time. It's quite a burdensome task to have an incorporated operation for 7 to 8 families, and the reporting requirements are rigorous. And everyone at that point decided that it was not a legitimate use of their time, so they reverted to the use that they originally set the project up for with the homeowners association. As I'll agree, it's been informal, but it's been functional. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, agreed money on our water systems and our roads over the last 60 plus years. And so that's my comments. And any questions or anything you'd like to know?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Do we have any written correspondence?
We have no written correspondence.
Would the applicant like to respond to anything?
Yes, I would like to respond to that. Try to be briefer than last time. They have not shown any proof that this is an HOA. This is not funny. They just say, hey, we have governance. We've met around the governance. Yeah, I think they have not proven here now that this is a HOA, according to Sterling Davis. All they've said is they have a covenant, which is correct, right? And they've met around it. It's fine. They're supposed to, right? Number one. Number two, they have met with the planner and they have shared a long trail of emails. It's all emails. I have never seen those documents until 2 weeks ago. They were never disclosed. If this was an official HOA, there will be official records. They just dug up some old emails, and say, hey, we're an HOA. You cannot define this as an HOA. It simply is not. Okay, 2 more. Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry, I also just wanted to address, I believe I heard Mr. Balch say that the property is currently being used as an unpermitted short-term rental. I'd like to correct that for the record, that is not true. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, that's not the case. And then 2 points on the road, and I have a slide, but I won't bother. I'll just explain. Okay, they have claimed last time and this time that the road is dangerous. I don't think it is. I don't think it is. It's a road like many roads in this area. It does narrow a little bit at certain points, but that's actually not the point. The road agreement says that the association is legally required to make the road safe. It says that the association is required to provide reasonable and therefore safe access, right? So if the road is dangerous, they have to fix it. They have not done that for the last 50 years. And suddenly the road is dangerous. They have patched it up, they have done maintenance, but they have claimed that the road is dangerous because it is narrow. And the easement provides for a 60-foot easement, which easily is big enough to put down a 2-lane road. So if the road is dangerous, they have to fix it. I should not be prohibited from use of my property because they have not fixed the road in the last 50 years. I'm done. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Have you paid HOA dues?
We have paid for the water agreement. We pay for the water, no HOA dues. Right, we just pay for the water. So every year or something, we get a water bill, and that's it.
Every year, do you receive an invitation to an annual meeting required of HOAs?
No.
At which a board of directors is elected?
No. So I've been
Do
here.
you receive an annual budget for that road maintenance?
No.
Do you receive a disclosure of insurance for the common area, which in this case is that road?
No.
Thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it revolves around, it says, in the event the homeowners association objects to the issuance of the permit shall not be approved until, et cetera, ... Then it says, other appropriate entity with the authority to review, approve, validate, or otherwise act on the proposed use. Now, I guess my question would be, is the planning commission or board of supervisors considered another appropriate entity with the authority to review, approve, validate, or otherwise act on the proposed use? And so would the commission, since we would be reviewing all this, would the commission or the board of supervisors, once they looked at it and approve it, would we have that authority to approve or disapprove that or not? It has to be by a court or an arbitrator. It says or other appropriate entity. So that's my question.
If I could answer. Yes, it would be a chair, it would be a court or an arbitrator. My understanding of the provision is that that party would have the jurisdiction to resolve the type.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that a court or an arbitrator would have the jurisdiction to resolve the underlying substantive dispute about, that's been brought up, for example, about domestic water use, et cetera. So that's right. The intent, I believe, of the code is to allow that process to take place between the private parties before it comes back to the county.
Right, but my question is, what is what constitutes another entity, I guess? Because I understand a court or an arbitrator, but then it says another entity. So what does, in this particular case, another entity mean? Does it mean the planning commission? Does it mean the board of supervisors? And I'm not sure what other entities would be out there that would have the power to approve or disapprove. And I'm just, you know.
I understand. It would not be the planning commission board because it is not really an appropriate authority. It's one with the authority to review, appropriate, validate, or act on the proposed use of the action of the homeowners association. As far as other appropriate entity goes, a few things. First, I think that it's a catch-all. We don't know. It's an or. There could be some other appropriate entity under the law that might manage this. And I think this is just covering all bases. I don't know if there is some administrative arm of the state or somebody else who might be involved. But the point is to not limit it to a court or an arbitrator, to be clear that as long as it's an authority, appropriate entity with authority, that to resolve these questions, then it would satisfy the ordinance. I think that's why it's phrased so generally. So just to make sure that all potential situations are covered for those types of authorities. I'm sure there's others. I just don't know that they thought of them all.
And the wording on the code, like, it doesn't say that it must be denied. It doesn't say administratively. Because, and I guess I could interpret it differently. I guess like if it was brought to administration and they said, well, we have to deny it until it's looked at by somebody else. And that's why I was interpreting a different entity that would be able to approve it or not. And so I don't know, again, going to the same question, whether a planning commission or the board of supervisors can say, well, we're a different entity with a power to approve or not approve it. And that was kind of where, I mean, where I was kind of heading with that, not one way or the other. But anyways, those were kind of what my questions were. Thank you.
Commissioner Roberts?
I wanted to ask county council, in reading the staff report, I don't think we are saying, or that staff has said that this is, well, to the point about the homeowners association. It says the property is subject to a homeowners association, and to be considered a homeowners association, an entity need not be registered or formally incorporated, that they only need binding recorded covenants and management of a common interest development. So I wanted to ask staff to confirm that we aren't necessarily saying this conforms to all the traditional HOA requirements that have been brought up here, but that county council, it recognizes that it represents itself as an HOA, and so therefore we have to consider itself as an HOA.
Correct. The formation, the documents that were provided met the requirements under Davis Sterling to show that an HOA was formed. It is an affected HOA because it is water is affected by short-term rentals. That's about as far as the analysis goes. Whether the HOA has kept up with dues or followed other legal requirements, I would believe that's something for a court to figure out. But whether they've met, and just to be clear, it's not just what they've said for an HOA. They have provided evidence that they've met these requirements in the form of the court documents and other records, and that's met that threshold that I think requires the planning commission to act this way.
Okay, with that said, then I would like to move staff's recommendation, but I would like to have the paragraph on page 3 of the staff report that starts the term domestic purposes. That entire paragraph stricken from the board report. Even though it's not what we are adopting today, I also agree that I'm not sure if that's what we intend or mean.
Madam Commissioner, may I respond to something very briefly?
No.
No, not at this time. Thank you, Melissa.
And then you repeated, I couldn't hear the.
Page 3 of the board report. It's paragraph 3. And it says the term domestic purposes is not defined in Title 21. However, Monterey County Code Section 21.06.450 defines a family as one or more transient and on. That paragraph to me leaves a lot kind of in question.
Do you mind if I respond to it?
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, it is an opinion of staff. That does not mean that it is an opinion that the resolution adopts. As pointed out outside of the resolution, staff's purpose is to recommend to the board specific action based on, and the staff report is supposed to be the reasoning for the action that underlies the resolution. That sometimes, as in this case, includes statements like this, which are not part of the resolution. So the only action the board's being asked to take today is to adopt this resolution. They can disagree with the staff report. In fact, obviously it's well within your power to disagree with the recommendation of staff. So I don't know that I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that adopting the resolution in any way is a county endorsement of statements in the staff report, but that's my opinion.
Commissioner Daniels?
No, Commissioner Deal, sorry.
Commissioner Deal?
Yeah, I think we should have this conversation now. This is a statement of staff's interpretation that will be pulled up and used as a policy guidance in the future. This is a statement of county policy that will live on. And it is not directly relevant to this particular case at this time, since we're not making a finding of fact about whether or not the water is the issue. We're not there. We're just dealing with our own code that says we can't move forward. No, we aren't adopting it, but in effect we are. And I've been here, as I keep saying, long enough to know some of these pitfalls. And we've had statements like this from staff reports read as interpretation of policy. And so that's why I think those of us who have seen that tend to be really, really vigilant about any general statements that are not required by the action before us, because they need to be intentional. And we're not ready to be intentional on this yet. It may have been what staff was thinking, but it's not something that we can leave on the table as being a convincing and accepted outcome in my mind. And so that's what I would ask the help of council. Anytime you see a statement of policy that's not directly relevant to the resolution or action that we're taking, that you help us make sure we're intentional about whether or not that is something we're ready to say. It's really scary otherwise.
And I appreciate that. I just want to clarify. The point I was trying to make for the record was that it is not, in fact, a statement of county policy. County policy is decided by the decision makers, the board and the planning commission. That doesn't mean that what you're saying is incorrect or that that action is incorrect. I just want to be clear. Official county policy is not decided by staff. That's my only point.
Commissioner Daniels?
I also want to make sure in terms of pitfalls that we're not determining something that we've been trying to determine for a very long time in terms of the short-term rental ordinance, which is whether or not it's a residential or a commercial activity. And that is something that we have wanted an answer to. And it's been something that we've been doing a lot of digging, and I'm really hopeful that once we have an actual ordinance, there is some clarification to the answer to that question, but we're not there yet. And so that's another worry that I have about including this, and as well, linking, even though it's a mutual water and road agreement, council, when you were just talking, you linked the determination of whether or not it was a commercial or a, domestic water use somehow to the, I'm not even sure how it was linked, but I just want to say that the road has an impact to a short-term rental as well. I mean, it's not just whether or not the use is commercial or beyond, it's beyond a family using the water, so does a road. So it's not limited to water, and I just wanted to make sure that that was equally clear.
Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on the same question, and even to this letter, this from one of the attorneys. And then at the very part of one of the initial pieces of that, it says, any administrative permit, going back to an administrative permit, is discretionary and subject to a number of factors applicable here. And it goes to what I said before, but it specifically speaks about an administrative permit. And so it doesn't speak about the planning commission, and it doesn't speak about the board of supervisors. And I guess I'm stuck because it does, or at least it's an administrative permit, must be denied. Then I'm assuming it's administratively. And so if the administration is going through saying, well, it's going to be denied, but then it could come, and then it goes back to go into an appropriate entity with authority to review, approve, and goes back. And I don't know if the code says that the planning commission and board of supervisors specifically also have to deny it, or Monterey County has vested authority on planning, or the board of supervisors must deny it. And I don't know if the code specifically speaks to that, but if even the attorney is saying it's any administrative permit. And so it was denied administratively, in this case, recommendation, but then it's coming to the planning commission, it goes to the question, does it? Again, the planning commission or supervisor, would that be an appropriate entity with authority to review? And so I guess I'm just gonna leave it there, I guess. I'm interpreting as the administrative, and that it doesn't apply to the planning commission or board of supervisors unless the specific code says the county must deny it, whether it's the planning commission or the board of supervisors. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
This is.
Mr. Angelo, did you want to,
I
had you earlier wanted to say something?
Clarity on Commissioner Gonzalez's question. The administrative is the type of permit. It's not a designation of the authority, the appropriate authority acting on it. It's an administrative permit, whether it's the chief of planning approving it or the zoning administrator or the planning commission. The reason that the planning commission and the board of supervisors aren't an appropriate entity for the purpose of that code section is that they are not tasked with interpreting and making decisions on private contracts between parties. So the use of other appropriate entity is intended to be a catch-all because it could be a court, it could be an arbitrator, it could be something that's not listed there like a mediator or something, but it's not, the idea is that it's outside of the county's discretion. I hope that helps.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay.
We have a motion, I think.
Yeah.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Through the chair, I'm sorry for clarification. There was a second. Thank you.
Mr. Angelo got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, before we call for the vote, there was suggested changes to the resolution on finding one evidence C. I apologize, it's difficult to read. The change would change it from saying for that common interest development, i.e. a homeowners association, to say staff received resolution from the Altatira Association representing as an informal owners association with powers to enforce covenants, conditions, and restrictions pursuant to the October 29th, 1963 agreement, because that makes clear what was received by staff and then what where the scope of their authority comes from.
Commissioner Roberts.
I think I understand the intent of using the word informal homeowners association, but I'm not sure it's necessary.
Representing as homeowners.
But yeah, I think that they are representing themselves as a homeowners association. And that is for somebody else to decide whether they're formal or informal or.
Okay. Perhaps, how does our council feel about that?
Is it a homeowners association?
Oh, yeah.
What language specifically? I'm just trying to.
I don't know.
You have informal.
H also.
And I know where it is.
You have, well, a common interest development and a homeowners association are different things. A homeowners association is the governance structure for a common interest development. So you have to have one for there to be a common use zone, kind of inextricable in that sense.
Well, then, and if somebody else has something else, for me, the IE homeowners association, to me, that was okay because it described what the issue, what was presented to county council and how the determination was made. But I don't know if anybody else had an objection.
For my purpose, I made the request and the sentence you added relieves my concern. So
if they left IE homeowners association?
no, the IE homeowners association, if they're calling themselves a homeowners association, then they have. So that's not really debatable, but adding that staff received a
Yes, I agree.
resolution,
Yeah.
that sentence really clarifies my point for me. So thank you. Any other?
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Daniels?
So going back to the staff report, it reads that the property is subject to a homeowners association. To be considered a homeowners association, an entity need not be registered or formally incorporated. They only need binding recorded covenants and management of a common interest development. Would it be helpful to have that sentence in there? Is that, I mean, that seems to be the concern. The conversation continues about whether or not it's official or unofficial, but for the purposes of this staff resolution, it doesn't need to be a registered or formally incorporated homeowners association. They only need binding recorded covenants and management of a common interest development.
Yes, I agree, that would be a good addition.
It's on page 2 of the staff report under homeowners association.
As the maker of the motion, I'm okay with that change.
Second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Deal,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Getzelman,
Yes.
Commissioner Daniel,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Yes.
Commissioner Work,
Yes.
Chairman Salve.
Yes.
Vote, all but Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right, department report.
Yes, we do have a department report. I first want to start off with apologizing that Mr. Spencer had to leave. He is at the budget committee with the board of supervisors asking for some financial help for HCD. So fingers crossed he gets the. We need more questions. We also need to let you all know, or let the public know, that there will be a community meeting. It's scheduled for tomorrow via Zoom at 6:30 on the housing element sites inventory. And information as well as the Zoom link can be found on our website under the advanced planning section. We also had an update on CR Free. Phase 1 is slated to start April 2024. Phase 2 is slated to start April 2025. Phase 1 start date is contingent on FEMA finishing their environmental review, which is held up currently by a process that is related to the Carmel area wastewater districts, Army Corps permit and SHPO consultation. Current estimate is that it will be sorted out in time to make that start date.
Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you for that report. My question is two of them, actually. So first, regarding Carmel River Free, I seem to remember, and perhaps you could report back in the future unless you know now, that when the construction starts, there will always be an alternate route, like they were going to do some sort of drive around the bridge area so traffic doesn't stop and it's not impactful. That would be great to just get some confirmation, because I thought there was some effort to help with the congestion there. And then the second question is about the housing element and whether or not people can see the site inventory before tomorrow's meeting. Like if there's a list of what's going to be presented, I think that would be really helpful for folks who want to attend that Zoom and participate, just to have an opportunity to digest it before, because it's only, I think, an hour and a half or something. The meeting's not long. So if you could send us something, that would be great, that could get pushed out.
If I may, through the chair. In first, Melanie Breddy with Housing and Community Development Department. If I may respond to the first question regarding Carmel River Free. Yes, you're correct. Once there's construction that would be impacting Highway 1, there will be a constructed bypass road, which will be parallel to the current Highway 1, so that it will maintain access and flow of traffic during construction. That would not be constructed as a part of the Phase 1 project. That would be because we're not starting the work on the highway until Phase 2. With regards to the housing element, part of the community meeting is to share the information about the process and the criteria that was used to come up with the site's inventory, and kind of share that information with everyone collectively. We then intend to provide a response period, a 30-day review period, to get comments and questions from community members. So that is why we are getting that information posted tomorrow or Friday. It's just in its finalization period. That being said, we could share with the Planning Commission. We did share by supervisorial district for the supervisors a heads up preliminary look at that we could forward those memos to the Planning Commission if you would so like.
That would be great.
That would be great.
We'll look into that today. Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions, comments? Is that it for department report?
That is all I have.
All right, then meeting adjourned at 11:05.
That's